Hello, girls. So good to see you. I can't wait for today's show. It's been a lifelong path of chasing algae and other, diatoms and other exotic organisms that are supposed to be present. So typically what I'll do is ask you guys to introduce yourself, give us your background, and tell us how you ended up here. So we'll start with you, Merideth, because you're on the left.
All right. Thank you for having us, Leighton. We're really excited to have this conversation today. The story of how I got here is much longer than the podcast length.
We can always do another one.
We were talking about how great it would be to see the succession of events for each of the members of our team, because we do have a diverse team behind us. And but mine personally grew, I grew up in Mississippi, had a lot of family farmers. My granddaddy had Denton's Dairy, and everybody grew food in their yards and had fruit trees and had tons of food. So once I started growing food at home for myself, I really started asking the important questions about what we're putting into our food to grow our food, and what was working there. That really led me to go back and back and back through practices, through conservation practices, Ruth Stout's No Work Garden book, permaculture, indigenous practices, cultural practices and cosmology, gardening by the moon, all of the elements that go into growing. And, then I found my place to make, have great impact, really driven by Standing Rock and involvement there. Really inspired by the idea that we are all connected in these ways, and that water is life, and just how sacred and spiritual that always has been, and what a need we had for protectors all over the world of First Nations peoples' rights, land, water, cultures, and then all of the medicine and healing that comes with that. So I actually took what I learned from those experiences and studied whole systems design and permaculture, and started doing that work here locally. And then I was working on a farm here on Johns Island. I was studying their system, and they were trialing this live cell of algae in their fields. And I didn't know what was happening at the time, but I walked out into the fields, and Camille's heard this a million times, but I walked into those fields, and when you step on sponge cake, the soil was just amazing. The plants were really there was a vitality and a green health. There was a major health feeling that resonated, that really I responded to. And I said, what is happening here? I want to get involved in this. I want to do this. So I started then helping them kind of with research, just in different projects of my own for 2 years. And then once it was time to start the business around all of the brilliant work of the people that are not on the screen right now, Dr. George Taylor and Chris and Andrew, and there's so many people again behind us here. They had worked to learn how to grow a live strain of algae and make it commercially viable, so that other farmers could have access to this. And their big question was, why don't farmers have access to this? If we know this is so efficient, clean, and effective, then why is it not out there in the world in this way, in this live cell way of using algae in the system? And so I got involved then, and we've been growing the company pretty rapidly. And most of what we've been doing is education. That's what we love to do. We love the educational component of it. And, before we started the podcast, we were all talking about how much more there is to learn here. And so we're basically in space exploration, but, below our feet, which is really exciting place to be now. So, we work with the growers. I am directing research and partner development and growth of the company, and really just kind of, Tucker calls me the ambassador of the rhizosphere. That's what I would like to be. No official titles, because we all do a little bit of everything together, but speak for the trees, all that good stuff.
No, that's an amazing story. You felt the energy.
Yeah.
The energy, stuff that I talk about all the time is that bond, that connection, that grounding to environment and around you. And the sponge, isn't that amazing? You can feel it. And when you look back, you have no footprint, right? It's not compacted. That's the fungi. That's the architects, the engineers of that beautiful soil that in a healthy system are always present. So just a wonderful story. Now, you said Johnson's Island. Where are you in the world?
John's Island is south. So we're in Charleston, South Carolina. So we have the sea islands surrounding the peninsula of Charleston. So John's Island is our farming community area. So that's where Sweetgrass Gardens was. That's where it was a larger farming community. Now that's a lot of home developments, just like a lot of farming communities around the country. Now that we've been visiting them for the past 5 years, we see this is happening in so many places all over the world, really. But yeah, John's Island was our farming community. They grew a ton of tomatoes down there back in the day. Yeah, it's a beautiful area. Tons of live oaks, still a lot of dirt roads around. Really nice place to be. And so our lab is down there where we grow the algae as well. And yeah, the energetics, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I do joke all the time. My credentials to be here in this role is really that I learned how to commune with plants, and I learned to be a good listener and observer. And I study and read a lot of books and listen, and that's it. That's how I got into the space.
Awesome! What an amazing story. And yeah, people don't respect plants. They actually have 10 senses. Humans have 5 or 6 if you believe in ESP. So they're more advanced than we are. And I often joke, who's growing who here, right? Once we all die, kill ourselves off, they're going to have food for years.
That's right.
Okay, so Camille, let's hear from you. What's your backstory and how'd you get here?
Hard to follow, Mayor, but I guess I want to start with how we are connected and then my story. So I've known Meredith since I was a little kid. My aunt also lives in Charleston on James Island. And Liz and Meredith have been friends for a long time. And I always knew that Meredith was the one with the beautiful gardens outside her house. And I would ride bikes around there with my cousins and her daughters. And yeah, that was kind of the image I had in my mind. And fast forward many, many years to us reconnecting with this work. But yeah, so I grew up moving around a bunch. I went to high school in Boston, Massachusetts, and was not a farm kid. Spent honestly pretty little time in the outdoors until I was an adult, and then spent a lot of time in the outdoors and realized that was really where I felt more of a sense of belonging and community. I did some traveling and ended up moving out to Colorado for school. My degrees in education and specifically environmental issues and human biology and kinesiology. So I love science. I taught middle school science when I graduated. I also had a background in emergency medicine for a couple of years in college and did a lot of adrenaline work in the community, which I loved. And also I'm grateful that I'm no longer doing that, and there are other folks who continue to do that. So that sort of progressed me to teaching, mainly biology and physics and chemistry to 7th and 8th graders. I transitioned from that into farming, had an opportunity with a good friend out in Maine who has a organic vegetable production. They had some workers quit and needed some replacements sort of last minute. And I said, you know what, I'm just going to try this out. And I totally loved it. I loved being in the dirt all day. I loved being in the sun. I loved vegetables. I loved watching the greens and just everything about it. Felt like I really, became friends with all of those plants. And so then that kind of progressed me to want to explore other farming operations, did some traveling around the country, looking at different operations, studied permaculture with Starhawk at Earth Activist training, and worked my way back to Michigan, where my partner is from, and I'm settled here now in Grand Rapids, and started working with a regenerative livestock farm who focuses on animal welfare and really on soil health, mainly growing good soil for good crops to feed animals off pasture. And I've learned so much from Jill and Mary, who are the owners of Crane Dance Farm, and that has really grounded me in a world of feeding soil and learning about soil and really learning from the soil and from the microorganisms. So through that, I was looking for something sort of to add on, and Meredith and I had a couple of conversations about what was going on at Enlightened Soil Corp, and I thought that sort of the educational component may be helpful to develop some of that support that we wanted to give to our community of growers. And so I joined the team, and it's been a journey since. We've developed a lot of education to support our community and support our team and learn from the algae cells themselves, in addition to learning from our growers. I always say when I'm talking to a farmer on the phone, I'm learning 10 times more from you than you're learning from me, even though maybe it doesn't seem that way. But that is really where the education comes in, is in those relationships. And that's how we've really progressed to be here.
Awesome. So just a quick question. What does adrenaline work?
I was an EMT. I worked in emergency medicine, which is a very stressful environment.
Yeah. So you were,
and very essential.
Yeah, you were jacked up on adrenaline because you were trying to treat people in a hostile or uncomfortable situation. So I totally get it. Well, that again is a beautiful story. I love the fact that you're connecting the whole loop with the animals as well, because that's a huge piece of this. And these factory farms have got to go. They're destroying the environment. They're, just getting rid of their manure is a fucking environmental disaster, because it's so much. It's not being spread evenly. It costs too much to spread in the fields. It costs too much to truck it. So they create these lagoons, and it's just, anyway, I won't get on my soapbox. I'll try to stay calm today. So you two were childhood friends, and then you recently reconnected around the algae. So let's
my childhood.
Yeah.
Adulthood.
Thanks for recognizing my inner childhood is still ongoing. I'm still having my inner childhood experiences right now.
I'm 61 years old, and I'm still the little boy that I was when I was 10. So I totally get it. I'm much happier surrounded by plants and in the environment than I am in any other position. And I've been self-employed since I was 18, 19 years old. And there have been so many ups and downs with it. And as running a small company, you must have experienced a lot of the things that I did when, it's boom or bust. Either you have too much work, you don't have enough work. It's always about selling. It's always about putting yourself out there. And, a lot of times you're working for free, to whether it's building an estimate, drawing the plans, or just spending a lot of time working with the client, trying to convince them that you're the right person to do the job. So, it's a sacrifice, and it's self-employed or small businesses. It's not a 9-to-5 job. it's so much more. And I can tell, just by your expressions, you understand exactly what I'm talking about. And,
yeah.
The good side is that, you want to take a day off or play hooky or cut out early to go fishing or skiing or whatever, you can. And that's the benefit of it. But there comes a lot of stress and a lot of long hours, and often 7 days a week to keep the ball rolling. So.
Yeah, I was just listening to Camille's adrenaline work, and I was like, that was the preparation she needed for startup. For
Yep.
startup environment, she's handling the stress well, much better than most of us here, I think, because of that training you went through, Camille. Some days we're working at a pace, and I say this to our team all the time. We're working at the pace of need. There's great need for repair, reconciliation, reparation, regeneration, all the RE, everything, re-energizing, reimagining, all of that work. We're working, trying to keep at the pace of the need of Earth, of all the systems of water, of life. And so it does create a long, demanding day. And then trying to wrap that up in the needs of the money system is, that's difficult. Sometimes it's difficult to reconcile those parts, but both of those things are just energy. I wish we were algae and we could just utilize light for energy.
Right.
I'd be in heaven. I definitely am a plant stuck in a human body in this lifetime, but we are really figuring it out. And I think that, out of our team, we each need kind of a moment to help remind the others that are having a struggle that we are serving a bigger purpose. We are living in service, and don't interrupt the flow. Try not to stop the flow with the worry and the angst or self-doubt, all the things that come with, we're doing something really brand new in this space, but ancient. So we're being driven by this ancient ancestrally driven work, I guess is what I want to say. And we're still figuring out how to make it work for the humans, and learning a lot along the way that we didn't know before.
I love how you put it, the words "in service" together. That is it. You don't farm to get rich. You don't make compost extracts to be a millionaire. You don't sell biological products and ever expect to make a lot of money. It's just not possible. But the rewarding side of it, the connections, the spirituality, that's where the real success comes in play. I've had a long sorted life. I've had many different careers. My second iteration was stone fabricator when marble and granite first came out. This was in the 90s, early 90s. And, it was super hard work, destroyed my body, and would often realize how poor I really was because I'd be working in these mansions. Back in the early 90s, the only people that could afford granite countertops were the elites, the multimillionaire, billionaires that just had so much money oozing. And so it was a real kind of, at the beginning, a harsh reality of like, here I am covered in stone dust, dirty, beat up, in pain all the time from carrying this stuff around. And here is this world that I just couldn't understand. And the more I did it, the more I realized how big that world was. There were a lot of incredibly wealthy people. And then you start to go, well, how did they get their wealth? And how does it affected them? And I realized it's like a virus. Like, these people are never satisfied. They're always ripping shit out and redoing it, or changing wives, changing husbands, and just killing themselves because of the greed or the need to keep up with the Joneses personally. And, that's when I realized, well, after I got divorced, I went through a horrible shit show of a divorce. And I quickly realized, like, oh my God, I had built up, 2 huge houses that tricked the heck out, top to bottom, because I was a builder, a carpenter, a designer, furniture maker, stone worker. So my houses were killer, right? But I realized that I had worked myself to the bone, and everything could be taken away. And it was like a really eye-opening to say, what do I really need? Do I really need a bigger TV? Do I really need a new car? Right? I basically got to the point where I'm like, fuck possession. I mean, it's bad enough everything I earn, they tax. Everything I buy, they tax. Everything I own, they tax. So why do I really want to own anything? And it's not right for everybody. It's a different philosophy. But oh my God, talk about freeing and unburdening. And then you start to really get the concept of being in service to others. And that's where I would say wealth, incredible wealth, comes into play. Because let's face it, at the end of the day, everybody that helps somebody else, maybe changing a tire, maybe just being there and listening to them, that's rewarding. It's one of the greatest ways of achieving joy as a human trapped in a vessel, is to be in service, to help other people. So again, I don't mean to get on a soapbox about all this stuff, but maybe some of my experiences will be passed down so other people don't have to suffer the consequences of coming to that reality. And trust me, I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. I mean, I was a happily married man, devoted to my wife and my kids, dedicated to making their lives better than mine was, because that's the way I was brought up, only to have it all go away and then not even be able to see my children, like, and ending up in a ghetto in East Boston when I had 2 fucking mansions. So please, like, if anybody's listening to this and that kind of resonates, stay focused on success that is not property or accumulating. You don't need all that shit. What you need is soul food, man, is spiritual food that makes you happy. Like, you're excited to get up in the morning. Like, you don't know if you're going to make any money or not, but that's not the point. The point is that you're experiencing all of this joy and happiness through helping others. And it, like he said, it's not work anymore. Like, I work 7 days a week. It's not work. It's what I do. It's it makes me happy. Playing with the compost, like you were saying, being in the dirt, man, being around plants. It's just so rewarding. And so hopefully I can encourage, maybe it's even some of you guys, or you two, that the success should not be measured in monetary or property or any of those things. It should be measured in your happiness. So your happiness, not making other people happy, but what's giving you joy in your heart. And so I'm on a mission today. It's 3rd time up on the freaking soapbox.
Love it, Leighton. Love it.
Well, it must be because I'm so inspired by you two. So I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead, Merideth.
No. I just love how Ken pops in like that. It's like you get a thumbs up. I'm in, I'm out. That was.
Well, he's our Oz, man. He just pops out from behind the curtain periodically.
Well, I think I love what you're pointing out is that, well, it's so much above ground, below ground, same as above, so below. What we're learning is mutuality. What we're learning is an exchange of resources. There's enough for everyone. There's a real problem with distribution of all of the resources, and hoarding of wealth and hoarding of resources. And that's all, out there, out in the open, for everyone to see. And it should be shameful. It should be so shameful to have so much when people have so little. And, I think the time is right for people to take action, knowing those things that, even generational hoarding, why hold on to so much? It makes me so uncomfortable to eat a meal if someone's plate is empty, and it should be that way for everyone. And there really is enough to go around. And I'll say, I have 2 children. They're not as, I think when I see them and their friends and the things that they're striving for adventures and experiences. They're not following the framework of here's the job you get in order to make the money, in order to get the house, in order to get more cars, or whatever those things are. That material materialistic hamster wheel that everyone, is kind of, shown the way. The platform is very well built to jump on the wheel. And I see that they're not coming up like that. There's a lot more awareness. There's a lot more intentional ways of forming life around them in a way that's healthier. And I'm really hopeful because of that. Seeing that happen. I'm sure every generation feels the same way. There's some things you don't want to see so much technology, dependence on technology. And there's some things that you're just, okay, this, the ones that are born to live at this time were born at the right time. We're serving in the right time for the skills that we've been sent here with, and use them, learn them. And you said something about they can't take the things they can't take away from them. George, I remember one night at dinner, George Taylor, he's the founder of the company, was talking about a line from the Once and Future King about your education, and the things that you learn and the knowledge that you gain is the one thing that no one can take from you. So, we try to, yeah, we just try to live by that too. The more you learn, the less you can be controlled out of fear and anger. You know,
and the more you can give it away.
And the more you can give it away. Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
You guys as educators, you've seen the light bulb go off.
Yeah.
When somebody gets it, they're like, oh man, now I understand why this and that and this all work together. You know,
and then it's followed by a question.
Yeah, right. How rewarding is that? Camille, don't you love it when they ask you a hard question?
Yeah, 100%. I feel like the more knowledge you have, the more questions you have. Not only does the knowledge stick with you, but yeah, it's the classic more you know, the more you don't know. You just get into a place of, okay, what's the next thing to ask? And I have so many memories of teaching, especially kids who are really struggling to get something for, days, which in their lives seems like a really, really long time. And then finally there's something that clicks, and then they have like 5 more questions and they're progressing already towards the next thing. I love that. I think living in the question is the place to be. We can get too secure in our answers, and I think that is it can be dangerous.
It's called the slippery slope. As soon as you stop learning, you come complacent and you've plateaued, and there's nowhere to go but down after that, because you've stopped learning, you've stopped progressing. It might take a little while for that plateau to end and then start to slip off the slippery slope, but it's going to happen eventually. And that's the hard part as an educator as well. I mean, that when I started, nobody even knew what soil biology was. It was like, well, what are you talking about? It's just dirt. I'm like, no, there's a whole nother world down there. I could show you. Come, get behind my microscope, right? But they all thought I was a whack job. And in the last 5 years, especially post-COVID, I think a lot of people got trapped during COVID and started questioning, like, what am I eating? What am I doing with my life? Where's my happiness? Where's my joy? And all of those things led to that, like, what am I doing? Seriously. And people started reading, and people grew victory gardens, and a lot of them were not successful, but it gave them a different perspective, a different experience. And I think that in so many ways, like, all of a sudden the questions that I would get asked were so much deeper, were so much more powerful. And when I'd give them an answer, they'd be hungry and thirsty for more. And again, I think that, as you guys are young, you got lots of time ahead of you. You can make a huge impact because people are ripe for this. They're hungry for this information. And my God, Merideth, if you could walk a whole bunch of people through that field and let them experience what you did, maybe not all of them would get it, but I guarantee you a lot of them would be like, wow, I don't know what that was. Maybe I didn't realize my feet were squishy, or maybe I didn't realize what soil actually feels like to walk on.
Yeah.
Maybe it would just be the vibration of the energy of the plants, the happy plants. But You talk about a power, right? That's a huge power.
Yeah. That's a part that really interests me, because I feel like we have put a lot of directions and science even in between human innate knowledge of health and vitality and interaction in that system. And I can't wait for the day that, we utilize all of these, significantly statistical data. We use all this amazing technology to help people learn how to create a healthier system. But once they know what that feels like and know, they're more in tune with their own crops and their own fields and their own plants and their own trees, and are able to measure those things on their own by, picking up their soil and smelling it, or, checking their plants mid-season, really interacting more in their systems, even if they have thousands of acres, there's going to be a more innate knowledge that comes back to humans when they interact in this way in a healthy system. And I can't wait for that. That's going to be a long time. There's a lot of ground to help heal and work on. But we see this, Camille and I see this all the time. Once you start working with the cycles of nature within a system that has been degraded for even just many decades, since the first green revolution, let's just say toxic chemicals and pollutants have been dumped in this ground. Once you start that first step back towards the cyclical nature and of healing and self-healing, it moves pretty quickly. It moves faster than you expect into self-healing, self-optimization, balancing, system. And that part's pretty amazing. You think you were doing this work and we're not going to see the completion of this for decades and hundreds of years, possibly. It's all cyclical process. But, even in a season, we'll have growers calling us back and they're just shocked that they've seen some changes in health of their cropping and system and their production and things. And so that's really a lot of fun. It's an early win for folks. The algae was, made for this. This is how they evolved, being first in the food chain, first in the, repair system, in the great oxygenation event where all of us are breathing air, because of these algae and cyanobacteria specifically, them becoming symbiotic with chlorella and fungi and lichen, and then soil, all the other soil components and all of the other species that come after that. But we're just scratching the surface really of all the things that will happen once you start repairing the system with itself, and like Ray tells us, approaching Mother Nature's molecules with Mother Nature's molecules. We're just that time period that you're talking about, COVID times. I just called that, I made a great playlist around it and I just called it the Great Remembering. Mm-hmm. And, that's why everyone was so hungry, because they remembered that they were insatiate, they were not satiated. They were empty from the way we've been living.
So true. Camille, you've been shaking your head, so I know you got something to add.
Totally. I mean, I love that you brought up the above ground and below ground there, because we talk about that all the time. And when we have these community connections that we're working with our growers or with our partners or with, people in the community and conversations like this, where, we don't know you, but now we know you in some way, and, we're forming those connections that have been naturally occurring below the ground for, billions of years. And I think focusing on that kind of mirror image above and below is really, really what we're trying to do on all aspects of this. And what we've learned from the work that we are doing educationally and the work that the algae is doing in the soil, and specifically in times of really high stress, both above and below ground, I think we're seeing the resilience that these algae cells are really meant to be here to support these stressful conditions, whether that's a drought event or an environmental stress. It could also be toxins that have been in our soil for a really long time, or stress in our communities from events in weather or events in our lives, personal lives. I think that's a really important component that we've seen a lot, especially in this last year. I mean, so many of our growers have been saying this has been the most challenging year yet. And there's been so much stress on their fields and in their crops and in their communities and with pricing. And it's just amazing to see the impact that returning a cell in high concentration that is, an ancient organism that's been here long before any of us and the organisms we know, is able to help repair and restore that system.
Well said. Very well said. There's so many directions we can go here. I probably ought to talk about algae. I love the trend we're on right now, but maybe we should roll in what we're supposed to be talking about. So one of the interesting things, and please use this, that I came up with early on to try to explain. I worked with Dr. Lane Ingham down at Rodale, and the reason I went there was because I had been playing with fish manure. It's really not manure, because as soon as a fish poops, poof, it's in suspension, right? It's not a solid. It's a suspended solid in a liquid. And I brought this down to her and I was like, listen, your friend Jeff sent me here because whenever I put this on plants, it explodes. And I don't know why. Can you explain it to me? So she microscoped it and was like, oh my God, where did you get this? And I said, well, it's fish poop. And she's like, wait a minute, you can't go behind a fish with a pooper scooper. How did you get it? I was like, well, I built this radial flow filter to separate, let the solids or the suspended solids separate out from the liquid, so it was clean enough I could put it back in to my aquaculture system. So it was kind of a, I knew the value of it and I wanted to collect it, but it's just as important for the overall fish health. The healthier they are, the better the manure is, the more they eat, blah, 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 blah. So it was a win-win to do this. And the first thing it took a couple of weeks. Like I ended up spending literally 18 months, 3 to 4 days a week down there under her, which I got like a PhD on steroids because I was so driven. I was asking all the right questions all the time. And, a few months in, maybe it was a little bit longer than a few weeks, we came to a point where, she was like, well, there's difference between aquatic and terrestrial organisms. And I was like, well, Elaine, I disagree. And she was like, what? not a lot of people disagreed with Elaine, trust me. And she goes, well, why would you even state that? I go, well, first of all, you've shown me how to, collect soil inoculants. I see the same amoeba. They're shaped the same. I see the same naked or testate. I see the similar nematodes. Maybe they're all genetically different, but for the most part, they're functioning in a very, very similar way in both places. And I go, plus, Elaine, imagine if you could go back to, say, I don't know, the year 1000. We had mass migrations. The sky would darken with the migrating birds. That, when the fish rolled into the harbor, you could walk on the water. The Indians talked about this stuff, right? Or the indigenous, out of respect. They talked about this stuff. And so the animals dragged the terrestrials, the muds, and all of that stuff into the rivers. The rivers overflowed and washed the terrestrial stuff all the way to the ocean. The birds did the same thing. They brought aquatic organisms up. They ate the algae, they ate the duckweed, and then they would poop when they flew over the land or come up on the land and poop. So there was a constant interaction with everything that was in the water as below as above, right? They were ambiguous. They're the same, man. And so she thought about it for a minute, and I think that was the last time we ever really butted heads about that kind of concept about what would the planet have been like, 2,000 years ago, 100,000 years ago, before mass expansion of humanity. And with that kind of common sense understanding, it only makes sense that was why this planet turned into the Garden of Eden, was because of that cross-pollination with the aquatic and the terrestrial organisms. So now that I got up on that soapbox again, didn't I? So let's talk about the function of algae. Like let's talk about what it does, how it gets energy, what its excrement looks like.
Yeah. No, I appreciate absolutely talking about, their move from aquatic to, the creation of all of the land creatures afterwards, all the way up to us. We see the connections. Absolutely. So we're working with microalgae, which differs from a macroalgae, but a lot of people are more familiar with a macroalgae, like a seaweed, which is basically an assemblage of all of the microalgae or photosynthetic cells, really. And then, so the microalgae that we're working with in particular is sea vulgaris. It's a chloroplast, common green algae. And which means it's, located all over the globe, which, there was some science behind, there was a lot of white paper and studies and data behind Chlorella vulgaris in particular in agriculture before we started the company. It had been utilized, but not studied as a live cell in, its functionality and how it improves plant systems. So that's the cell that we're working with. So Chlorella vulgaris is a chloroplast, single cell organism. And yeah, we were, growing this tiny cell. I say Andrew and the team are growing this tiny little cell in bioreactors, and in very clean environment, to keep them, nice and shelf stable so they can go out into the world and do exactly what they've been doing for billions of years. As they interact in the system. What we first started talking about truly with the Chlorella vulgaris, because at the time of starting the company, we really only knew to talk about these signaling molecules and the phytochemicals, phytohormones, interactions between plants and algae and bacteria and algae and fungal species and algae. And we were watching these interactions and studying, watching them and seeing them through these measurables like the Haney test, and some genomics sequencing. We're studying soil respiration and watching, their interaction with the bacterial and fungal communities, increasing both of those, increasing all this activity in the rhizosphere. Soil respiration is basically how they're measuring the amount of microbiology or in the microbiome, activity in the microbiome. And so we were watching these interactions and really only talking about those two things when we first started the company. And it wasn't until a study with Dr. White, James White.
Oh, I love that guy.
Oh my gosh. We were pretty blown away. We were talking about the correct interactions in the microbiome that were happening. We're missing one really grand interaction of algae. And, we're human centric, we're human focused in all of our research and decades of research. These algae have been doing this for, billions of years, but we're just discovering that, and what Dr. White discovered in the role of rhizophagy, that the algae are actually also endophytic, which means they're taken up by the plant roots through the root hairs, and they're carrying along beneficial bacteria and servicing that plant as the plant is, reaching and asking and signaling for the nutrients it needs in the way that it needs it. So it's really assisting in that nutrient uptake too. And they're naturally in soils, if you think about a river delta, the way that the algae interact there is the rivers flood. The reason that there's nutrient dense soils there is that the river's flooded and deposited all these algae cells, of many diverse kinds also, by the way, because there's so many different diverse species of algae, even more than plant life on land. That's how they've evolved to, and there's so much more to discover there. So that makes this also very exciting. But anyways, that algae is deposited, creating this nutrient rich environment because of that microbial activity and all of the succession of food in the food chain that grows from this first source of food and stimulant in the algae. So we're really, when you think about biomimicry or something like that, we're really just recreating that river delta in places where it's just been so depleted. I grew up, my mom's family, and grew up in Mississippi Delta, and other Delta regions that we visit are not as nutrient rich in those soils, right? Every place near bodies of water that have been farmed heavily in these past decades are just so depleted. So the algae are just getting back out there and really trying to revive. I personify the algae quite a bit. So I know a lot of science folks don't love that, but I think it's a great way to talk about them when you're trying to teach people about their mechanisms and what they're doing, how they're surviving, just trying to survive like all of us.
Yeah, you're definitely a plant trapped in a human body.
Yeah.
Camille, would you like to add some more to that?
We're very grateful for Meredith's interior plant. Yeah, well, one thing that as you're talking about the history of the algae, I love this anecdote. So Meredith and I both read this book called Slime, which if anyone is interested in learning more about algae, I highly recommend it. And the author talks about a particular instance of using chlorella in rice paddy farming. Yes, that's the book right there.
Nice.
And yeah, she talks about how people would colonize their rice paddies with chlorella cells, with live chlorella cells harvested from the environment. And this is thousands of years ago, but that was a way of improving fertility and production of rice by just using these live cells. And I just love that because it's such a simple tool and a simple setup, much more simple than our agriculture systems today. But I think it's just important to, recognize that there's history of people using these organisms and interacting with these organisms and forming relationships with them for a very long time. The only real difference in what we've done is we've created it to be shelf stable for growers. So the algae can survive in the dark. And they have a mixotrophic element where they can photosynthesize in the presence of light, but they can also eat organic matter. So we can have algae stored in containers in dark storage and cool dark storage out of sunlight for months. We have had algae in our lab for over 18 months that is still viable in cell count. George told me that today. And that's amazing. They're just feeding off of organic matter. So that's really the new part of this and how it's able to be marketed and brought to farmers. Whereas, the technology of it, which I struggle to call algae a technology, but the cells are really ancient, and it's their intelligence that is doing the work here. Another thing I would just share on the side of personifying algae, I like to use a metaphor to describe the rhizophagy cycle, which I've talked with Dr. White about a bit in our research reviews, but we have been calling it a bus because it can take in what's in its environment. And that can be other endophytes, that can be nutrients in the system, that could be salts or heavy metals that get locked up and are no longer bioavailable. But then that algae cell is a transporter, and it can move inside of the plant root. And we have these beautiful images from our work with him that show nitrogen fixing bacteria inside of these algae cells inside of a plant root. And when those algae cells go in there and the cell wall gets broken down by the superoxide, then what they have inside of them is now released, and it's directly where it needs to be to do the work in the plant. And that mechanism has been so helpful for us and for, I think, a lot of our growers to understand the importance of living roots in the soil is really the foundation of what we need. And, we work with lots of folks that are experimenting with cover cropping and other forms of keeping living roots in the system all year round. But, and I live up here where it's very winter right now. And we have living roots in the system that we seeded from the fall and are continuing, and it's cold and there's snow on top of them, but there's still biology happening underground. Some of that may be dormant, some of it's not, but that kind of, we work with the cycles of these processes. And it's important to remember that, the algae have been around for, I think it's like 1.7 billion years. And so, some of the cells are going to die, but overall they've been on the planet for a really, really long time. And so continuing that stimulation, continuing the relationships and the plant pathways that are being turned on for this communication between species is really keeping this a sustainable system that is happening, again, both above and below ground.
Love it. Really well explained. And Camille, just for your own benefit, call it anti-technology.
I like that.
That's what I think. Oh no, this is anti-technology and anti-business, because I literally treat your soil once or twice and you never see me again unless you screw up and put a synthetic down. So, so it's an anti-technology and technically we are anti-business, because once we regenerate that soil and get it up and running, we don't really need to repeat it. And that's a huge difference between the synthetic business model where you are addicted to their crack and you have to use it every year. And so, again, I applaud you guys because you are doing things that go against the system in a way that's not only disruptive, but super beneficial for the future and I mean the whole ecosystem, not just humans, right? You've seen it when the ecosystem comes back in, everything just starts to explode. And maybe you guys could talk a little bit about that, your experiences on what you've seen post-treatment, whether it was 1, 2, or 3 treatments.
Yeah, I think there's an important component here about transition. So we work with growers, any kind of grower you could think of, any practices, any crop, any region, any background, like we are in community with them. And it's very important to focus on the transitional element. Like, I think as somebody who did not grow up with an understanding of agriculture, I will definitely admit that I did not know a lot about how farmers change practices or how farmers don't change practices and what that looked like. There's a lot of misconceptions about that we're told as consumers. And it's very important to understand that there's so many factors that go into risk on a farm operation, and the generational component and the land component and the money component, and all of these factors are leading people to make decisions. And so I think one of the things that we focus on is supporting people with the next step, not necessarily a whole master plan to become something, but just the next step. Like, what is something that's easy to implement, that doesn't cause more work, that's not super expensive, that's going to improve a profit for that group and improve nutrition and health. And that next step is oftentimes in the world we're working in, this compatible live organism that can do so many things in the soil, this algae, but it's really a transition tool. So when we are working with communities, we want to focus on that level of transition and being right there for support with this education and with our team, which, as Mayor said, is diverse and supportive in this kind of collaborative way.
Mm-hmm.
Love it. Meredith, would you like to add something?
No, there's not a whole lot to add to that. The transitory space is something that we really do care for. We care for the grower through that change. And like Camille said, it could be the first step or it could be a last step. It could be everywhere in between, where they're adding algae to their regular fertility system, where they're dabbling in nitrogen reduction and removing and pulling back on some percentage of fungicide as we increase the health of and diversity of those microbial populations that actually protect the plant through pathogenic instances or insect pressures or those sorts of things. The whole time we're trying to show them why that's happening by utilizing these amazing measurables that we partner with some of the best labs and consultants to help us with that learning tool that we're using to say, okay, this is why your crop made it through that hailstorm. This is why, where you had algae, you saw, this other health metrics, bigger root mass, sweeter fruit, wherever the health indicator is. That's a really fun part to say, okay, since this is happening up here, we see this also happening below ground, where your plant was able to access more calcium when it needed to. And we had just last week, we had 3 different epiphanies with 3 different consultants while we were running through our soil reports, which were it's just amazing to be in this learning space. How we describe success and improvement. And the way that we talk about it was just really amazing to see. I'll start with what we normally, go through with the grower. We utilize a Haney test as one of our measurables that measures biological activity and also kind of what you have available in your soil for those plants to access in NPK, in micro and macronutrients. If the plant can access them because you have enough life supporting that plant, then you may not need to add so much to the system. So we go through these reports, then, you can compare them to a regular Malic 3 report, and you can see, okay, well, this is asking me to put on 50 pounds of nitrogen, but this one's saying I have this much available. I only need 20 pounds here, 100 to 50 pounds. There's a lot of difference in cost for the farmer at that point right there when you're looking at these measurables that we're telling the story through. And that's how we help the growers make a conscious economic decision about where they're going to be pulling back, maybe some other of these more harmful inputs. So they're fascinating tests to go through. So we're going through one of our Haney's PLFAs. That's a phospholipid fatty acid measurement, also of the microbial mass and also diversity in the soil. And we also were going through some Rise Bio, which were genomics studies that we really love this technology. We're really getting this whole story from the soil and the rhizosphere interaction and all the microbial communities through the plant nutrient uptake, through yield, and trying to tell this whole story. We think this is really an important place to be for the grower, and telling those stories as wholly as we can, as holistically as we can. So last week we're on the calls and we're always talking about increasing microbial diversity, and biodiversity everywhere is a health metrics. I don't even feel right in a room where there's a homogeneous amount of anything. Humans, all the same thinkers, all the same, dressed alike, whatever that may be, social constructs you're living within, that doesn't feel healthy to me. So we're always talking about biodiversity as the key. And we were really looking at this one, these samples of how every time we've added the algae to a crop, we've seen the plant functionality really increase. But in some instances, the soil wasn't really ready to provide because it was in a depleted state, and the biology wasn't there, recruited enough to provide these nutrients that the plant was literally asking for and seeking out. So we were increasing efficiency in the plant, but we still needed to kind of spoon feed some nutrition in the soil. It's helping us figure out how to help the growers take those steps even more efficiently. That was, so we need to talk more about functionality rather than just focusing in on this story of microbial diversity. The other piece of that was that one of the other genomics tests was showing that we had community evenness, which means we had kind of a harmonizing, a balancing of the recruitment of microbials that move these nutrients, but we didn't have higher diversity. So the plants were doing right recruitment. They were able to do, the communication path was cleared. So the plants were able to communicate to the microbiome and recruit the fungal and bacterial species to an evenness that brought the nutrients up that they needed. So not necessarily the focus on diversity equaling that functionality, but that the plant had a clear communication path to access what it needed to grow and produce healthily. What was the third one, Camille, that we were
I want to add, well, I don't know if this is what you're thinking of, but I have a third thing to add.
Okay.
So we also run a total nutrient digest, which is also a test through. Is that what you're thinking of?
Yeah, totally.
Okay. So a total nutrient digest is a test through Regen Ag Labs as well that is essentially looking at what nutrients are stored in the soil. And what we were seeing with this right microbial recruitment and therefore the appropriate nutrient cycling for the plant to function better and also for the soil to function better is that the long-term fertility storage in the soil was way improved. So what's happening here is that the right microbes are being recruited to serve the plant with the nutrients that it's been asking for and build a nutritionally dense plant. And at the same time, those microbes are able to keep fertility in the storage, in the soil, as this long-term storage. It's like a savings account. Mm-hmm. And so what we can see and what is really helpful for our growers is to be able to see, like, I have all of this stored in my savings account. And so next year, I don't have to go and apply, X pounds of phosphorus or X pounds of nitrogen, because I can see that it's right there where it's needed. And now I'm recruiting the correct microbes, the microbes that are going to do the work to mobilize and make those nutrients bioavailable to the plant in the next growing season. Even if it's a spring, summer plant and then a cover crop, same sort of situation. And that is, the whole picture there is amazing. And Leighton, I definitely would love to connect you with Josh and Keenan at Rise Bio, who are doing some of this metagenomics work. I think they would be great guests on your podcast, and are really looking at a holistic picture, because oftentimes we will take a soil sample and we get this sort of snapshot, or we'll take a sap analysis and we'll get a snapshot of a leaf, or et cetera. But that's great and that's super helpful. But when we can see a whole picture, it's almost like we're making a movie. We're putting all these pictures together and we're able to see the whole thing. And what's been fascinating in this particular study that we've been talking about is that we're looking at different growth stages of a crop. And we're able to see throughout the growth of a crop, how are nutrients moving? Where are they moving to? How are they moving from the soil into the plant, or back into the soil, and what's going on with the microbes that are recruited to do so. So it's very fascinating.
It's fascinating.
Oh,
I just wanted to jump on for a second, guys. Think of it as predator-prey. Unless you have the prey species, which is, your algae, etc., you can never have the evolved species. And that's what the plant is doing, is getting that, cycle going where they have all the levels. That's why I love Leighton's horizontal soil system, because that's what it's promoting, is the whole cycle.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So I look very much forward to speaking with them. Now, you're working with the lab in the Midwest. I think they just partnered with Biomakers and Bee Crop 2.0. Is that correct?
We do utilize bee crops as well. We send a lot of our handy samples to Regen Ag Labs, but what we're developing to move forward is a bioregional approach to everything. Yep. I mean, we are ecosystem services. That's where Camille and I are deeply embedded in the life of whole systems approach and holistic healing. So, if we're going to work with growers in a region who are all in this, learning center, utilizing certain kinds of measurables with certain labs, we want to do what's best for the region to, for those growers to access the knowledge base that they've been using too. So we're open to working with all kinds of measurables and labs and everything. We love our partnerships with, the people that we've been working with Liz and Russell and Josh and Keenan and, everyone, the Biomakers group. We started out with Biomakers and utilizing those samples too, and we've learned a lot from all of these aspects. So we look forward to layering in as many as we can: sap analysis, tissue analysis, cover crop analysis. However we're devouring all of this knowledge, and honestly, we need to take some time to digest. And so we're hoping that'll happen after this spring, digest a lot of this that we're learning, because we're learning at a very rapid pace.
Yeah, it's called waterboarding. That's the world I live in. Just
yeah.
So I think a lot of what you're talking about in a bigger picture is what's called aggregation. Mm-hmm. So healthy soil, you have aggregates, and those aggregates have internal pockets. Think of them as like, who is the elephant in the piece of dust?
Horton here's a who.
Yes, thank you. Right. Each one of those aggregates is an entire community, a city, a state, where you've got waterfalls, you've got, pockets of anaerobic condition, pockets of aerobic condition, but all of those function in a very, very important functional way. Sometimes you need anaerobes to digest or break down different minerals because of the pH. They are only available at a lower pH or a higher pH. So, all of those things are so critical. And what you're doing is you're inciting the necromass.
Yeah.
So there's this thing called the necromass, right? You guys are familiar with it. A lot of people never heard that term before. But basically it's the spore banks, it's the cysts, it's sometimes the minerals they're bound up or bio non-available, but you're inciting the restoration of an ecology on a level that does allow for a predator to blow in on the wind or by a duck that just flew over and took some poop, right? So if the environment is correct for them, they will thrive. They will inoculate. If it's not, they'll either die or cyst until it's right. But either way, in many ways, you guys are, I hate to use the term silver bullet, but in many ways, like this other project I'm working on, Ecosphere Sciences, it's the same thing. They produce this liquid that's amniotic fluid, primordial soup, liquid lichen. It's just this perfect environment for whatever necromass is present to come out. And not only does it provide that liquid, that baby food, mother's milk, whatever you want to call it, but it also provides the necessary bacteria, the diversity that you guys are talking about. And you talk about like jump starting stuff. Like I've been very successful in turning, degraded soils that were basically only weeds would grow into super healthy, high performing hay fields within 1 year. Well, some of the stuff we're doing now, it's like months. We're cutting it back to literally months, taking that degraded soil. I can't wait to get a hold of some of your stuff and start playing with it, because in many ways you did the same thing that ESS does. Now, ESS basically created a living organism, a living functioning stomach inside of a mechanical vessel. So you guys have your bioreactors. Well, this is like a bioreactor, but a lot more complex. It has a buffering agent, has heat, has aeration, has agitation. So it's probably 4 or 5 steps more than what you guys did, but it's similar. It's very similar in that regard. And so, this is something that while I've been working with ESS, I've had to stay focused on what the inputs are. In other words, most starts with a spike in a biological inoculant that took him 15 years to figure out, because it has to remain stable. It can't crash. So basically what he's done is it works like this. You feed stuff in, and as soon as you're done feeding, you step back and the stomach goes quiet. As soon as you start feeding again, the stomach just starts firing up again. And the next steps for working with ESS will be trying to add other biological components, like my compost, like your product, like fish brew, which has the diatoms in it, because now you're giving those organisms the ultimate food for them to thrive. So it may be that in a matter of a month, you can turn degraded soils back onto a path of measurable aggregation, plant health, ecology, bringing in the bugs. We talk about, soil building. We want to see centipedes. We want to see roly-polies or isopods. Those are critical. And Elaine herself has like moved up the notch on biocomplete compost to now you've got to have some of these shredders. You got to have the millipedes. You got to have some springtails. So, that's another level of jump starting the ecology. But again, if I can only imagine if I took your stuff and added it to a compost pile, what would happen? Yeah. It would explode. Have you done any work with that?
We have. Yeah, we have. Actually, we're all doing bioremediation work,
Gonna ask you that next.
We're all doing bioremediation work. When we first started, some of my friends said, okay, tell me in layman's terms the work that you're doing. What are you actually doing? And I said, remember all the wild parties at our house? Remember who was in the kitchen cleaning up afterwards? That's what we're doing still. We're doing that work. And I think we've definitely utilized the algae in some vermicomposting facilities and composting production with groups. And yes, it's an addition to help boost the recycling, the nutrient cycling, the breakdown, the prey predator, all the things that you're talking about, it assists there. And we've always known we have this one beautiful cell to keep, colony to keep alive and to share, but it's always been about finding our friends out in the, out in the ecosystem to create a program that can match and be as efficient and clean as the programs that farmers have been tied to. I'll say tied to is a really nice word, but controlled with. The systems have been in this static state of needing to all of these inputs. And if we can create a program together with what you're doing and what we were learning over here and who's got this and let's do this, we can come up with a really useful, efficient, economic recipe card together, from our kitchen of collaboration. And that's what we want. We want to see that. I want to see that.
I do too. That's the reason why I do this podcast.
Yeah, you are. You're doing it.
No.
Yeah, and
go ahead.
I was going to say one of our definitely one of the ways that we work is with bringing the personal land stewardship side of things, like to our growers. We have growers who are walking their fields every day, looking at their plants, calling us saying, "Oh my gosh, I noticed this pressure is lower, or this leaf is greener," whatever. And we also have people who are not walking their fields every day and can't maybe, or haven't been. But to incorporate that practice of like how are these people relating to their land? How are we all relating to the land that we are farming and growing things on? And to incorporate the algae alongside everything, not just other products or other solutions, but what's already there, what's already in the soil, what's already growing natively or not natively, and what has been planted and all of that. I think that the interactions on all of those layers, we always sort of use the phrase stacked solutions, and the stacked solution starts with like what's already present and sort of the history behind it, and then moves from there. I think it's been really interesting. One of the questions I like to ask new growers that we're working with is like, do you know any of the history of how your land has been managed before you started managing it? And some people don't know, but there are definitely people who do know the history of the last 20 years or the last 50 years or the last 100 years of management. And that tells such a big, important story of what is there. So I just think that's important to kind of weave into that narrative.
Mm-hmm. I think that's brilliant. And, I hate to do this, but will you guys promise to come on again? like soon? There's so many facets to the conversation we're having that we don't have enough time. I mean, look how many questions you guys got. You already got 10 questions. And typically we break at the half hour to answer a few, like 5, 6, maybe 7 questions, but you guys have broken the friggin' meter. So I'm afraid that if we don't start answering questions now, that we aren't going to get all the way through this. So that's why I asked if you promised to come on again. So why don't we jump to questions? Because again, I could go down so many rabbit holes with you guys right now. It's not funny, and I want to have the time to do it. But I don't want to deny the audience, the questions, because I think that's an important part of the education, is to allow them to ask questions and then for us to come up with the best possible answer. So Ken, take it away, my friend.
Of course. Yeah, the questions are fantastic. We're going to start with this one. So education is what they are about. Do they offer courses or classes?
We would love to. Currently, we are not offering courses or classes. We do offer a community webinar series, which is different than maybe a traditional class, but is a community learning space. So multiple times a month, we have live webinars. They're all recorded and on our YouTube. So you can find the past ones there, but those are spaces where we bring on guests that are typically partners or folks in our community, farmers, researchers, experts in the field, and collaborators. And sometimes it's a presentation, sometimes it's more of a discussion. It varies. We like to be flexible, and a lot of it is talking and answering questions. So definitely join us there. We also do some information sessions that are just short, kind of office hour style. I'll do a 10 or 15-minute presentation about who we are and what we do, and then just chat with whoever comes. So we have one of those actually coming up on February 12th, I believe, and I can send you guys the link if you want to share it with your community.
Yes,
Please.
We would love to offer more educational resources in the future. That's something that I'm very interested in building as a part of this community.
you're in charge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And all the webinars and everything in the past are on EnSoil TV on YouTube too, so you can access those. But we will talk about algae and everything we're learning all day long. You know, give us a call until we have a course set up. Let's just talk about it.
Love it.
And we can
Takes a village.
Yeah, it does take a village. Yeah, we like to share all the research. We're open about all the research that we've done and share all of that too.
And next time you guys come on, we'll have to simulcast the interview onto your channel as well.
Oh, that's good.
That would be great.
That's a great idea, Ken.
Yeah.
Well, that's what we love to do. It's all about the education. The more people that see it, the better everything is.
Yeah.
Totally.
So we'll jump to the next question here. Shooter wants to know, I water my garden with pond water. Does the algae in pond water work in a similar way?
That is a great question. Yes, algae is located, like we said, in all marine environments and scrape a tree, you will find algae there. Algae is in everything, from endosymbiosis, times however many, lines of succession you can see happening there. But yes, you'd get the benefits from algae there. One thing that we saw in one of our research projects that was really interesting was a farm that was watering their farms from their pond. And when we started using algae in their systems, we were looking at these different fields where they were watering from their ponds, and they actually were getting some pathogenic response, Phytophthora and some things like that were originating in the pond water there. So there was an overgrowth in the pond that was then entering their system. Now that's in a really big system, that you can create a pathogen from anything. When there's an overgrowth in the system and an imbalance there. But yeah, you should be getting some algal species from your pond water as well. And that's a great way to, complete the cycle, keep the cycle going from your pond. I think that's great.
So one of the things that I suggest to people to do when they are starting a new garden or raised bed or whatever, if they do have access to clean river, stream, or pond water, harvest some of the algae. Like, when I first got out here to California, I live in the sand dunes, like literally it's sand. You technically can't grow anything, right? Well, the first thing I did was I collected a whole bunch of kelp that had washed up, and I brewed it, or I just put it in a bucket and fermented it, I should say. And when I noticed the white foam coming up, because I'm a biologist, I go, it's working. So I microscoped that. The amount of friggin' organisms, predators and stuff that was in that was insane. So it's the same concept. Go to your stream, go to your river, collect different species. Remember, diversity, diversity, diversity. You can take them and put them in a bucket and ferment them. You can put it in a bucket and bubble it. Doesn't matter. Either way, you're going to get the biology to release, whether it's endophytic and inside, it'll come out, or whether it's on the outside. It will come off and be present, and then you can apply that liquid to your soil or your plants, and you will see a difference. Another great trick is a sponge. Get a natural, organic, sea harvested sponge, tie a string to it with a rock and another string so you can pull it out, throw it in the pond, and let it naturally grow. Those organisms will just attach themselves, similar to like a fish filter. Same concept, right? So those are a couple of great ways of harvesting your local indigenous microbes from your aquatic ecosystem. And I love the pond. You're so right, man. Especially if that pond has been over nutrified from the runoff, that's going to create anaerobic conditions, and that's where your pathogens are going to thrive, and then you could actually be detrimental to you. So, either use products like what she's offering, algae, or put a bubbler in there to agitate it and keep some aeration so it doesn't go completely in.
Yeah, the bubbler is a great idea. Keep a bubbler in there. There was an instance out west, some overgrowth of cyanobacteria, blue-green algae overgrowth.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be very, very careful about the overgrowth. We utilize the life cell of algae to keep from, nutrients running off and offloading into waterways and creating algal bloom. So we answer that question quite a bit in our work. Why would I want algae here when I'm trying to get rid of algae over here? Not all algae is the same, and anything really is beneficial in the environment until there's an overgrowth of it, and then it can become a pathogen. And BMAA from overgrowth of blue-green algae can be pretty dangerous for animals and humans and all life. So,
yep, it's all about balance.
We're working with someone right now who is trying to do some pond water filtering. And they are using wood chips and worms and biochar and some mushroom blocks, and recently asked about incorporating chlorella into their system. And we had a conversation with our marine biologist about it. And the way he explained it is that the algae are most efficient at consuming nitrates as their sort of preferred form of nitrogen. They can consume nitrates and ammonium, but most efficiently they'll consume the nitrates. And so for systems where it's really nutrient rich and you're trying to essentially filter out some of that nutrient for recycling the water, the algae will eat those and use those as kind of building blocks and food sources. And so that's a great interaction to be able to add to that kind of system.
And also you should suggest they use a sand filter in the front. So what a sand filter will do is keep all that organic matter from getting down into those other reaction sites, the biochar and the mushroom substrate. Mm-hmm. And then what you do is just scrape that stuff right off the top of the sand, throw it in your compost pile.
I will let them know that.
That's a great way of reducing organic matter inputs that will cause imbalances and potentially anaerobic conditions.
That's a great tip.
Well, and Leighton, you talk about taking if you have a fish tank, taking the filter and doing the same thing of bubbling it, letting it grow out. And when it smells sweet, that's when you can use that water. It's the same basic thing.
Yep. The sweet smell is the indication that you're in an aerobic biological environment.
Yeah.
So that's so you don't have to use a microscope.
So our next question, can we purposely alter the endosymbiotes inside algae by combining the algae culture with another such as EM1?
I would say on a broad scale, I don't know. But my thought with this, if I'm interpreting this correctly, is altering the organisms inside of algae. I don't know how we can do that or if we can do that. What I do know is that we have lots of growers who are combining algae with a microorganism, mixture like EM1, or there's, plenty of them. And what we always recommend is to make sure that interaction is happening in your soil or on your plant and not in your area where you're making the EM1. Just so that the interaction and the alterations that are occurring naturally with the competitive environment of the soil and the biosphere and the plant itself. No, Mary, do you have anything to add to that?
No, that's it. I was just going to say the same thing. You want all your grazing starting in the soil, not in your tank or not in your batch.
Yeah, you'll end up with a disadvantage because one of them's going to outcompete the other ones.
Mm-hmm.
It's similar to what I tell people, like, don't add a lot of foods when you're making a compost extract because you don't want one species to be able to overtake the other ones. It's all about, again, creating the diversity and then letting the diversity get into the soil and then let it balance out. I mean, either way, either it's a food source, if the bacteria is not appropriate, it's going to be a food source for something else. If it is appropriate, or maybe it's not the right time, it will cyst or it will go into necromass. So it's all about getting the diversity in play and then letting Mother Nature take over. You're just a steward at that point.
Yeah.
Yep. It's great advice, ladies. Great advice.
Here's a quick one. What is the advised microscope?
Oh, okay. So clump, follow me on Instagram, send me a DM, and I'll get into that in detail. There's a lot of them out there. Some of them are junk. The ones that I do recommend are both inexpensive as well as comfortable and easy to use. So hit me up and I'll do some research with you.
And this is Leighton's IG. So just reach out. Okay, let's see. Can you use algae to remediate contaminated and contaminants and pollutions?
Yes. Yeah, that's one of those things that they've evolved doing and to do. The way that we've measured these Chlorella vulgaris cells, remediating, we see a heavy metal resistance. We see high saline environments where plants are able to exist, and the algae actually exist in high saline salinity environments too. So they have evolved to do this. This is part of their function in the soil system. So again, another reason we really want to be in these places where we're looking at bioremediation as the purpose of them being there. They've been doing that for billions of years, remediation.
That's one of the reasons why I invited you back on, because that's a lengthy topic.
I would love for that to be a whole topic. Absolutely.
That's it. Now we already. As soon as you get off, you guys book the next available. Let's get you on.
So Clump says he doesn't have IG. So Clump, just reach out to me at it'sallaboutthebiology@gmail.com and I'll connect you with Leighton. So we'll go back into the questions. And my wife, Silly Lily, would chlorella or spirulina be considered a microalgae?
Yes. Yes, both are, and both are in my cabinets as well. And I eat both of those on a daily or weekly basis.
You really are a plant, Merideth.
Yeah. If you think about this, you guys know this, the whole world is making this connection of the earth as our digester with our stomachs as a digester. So we're able to really relate those functions together now, and that's really helpful for everyone. But they're doing the same thing, especially if I'm traveling. I'll take my chlorella with me for environmental toxins and places that I'm visiting, or just not eating healthy while I'm traveling or something. And it also, you can tell when you get really dark circles if you haven't been taking your chlorella or spirulina out. It just really helps in functioning a healthy body system. So yeah, both of those are microalgae and really beneficial.
Now, the spirulina is filamentous too, correct?
I don't know spirulina as well as I know chlorella.
Okay. Yeah, spirulina is typically grown in a brine water, and it looks like angel hair. It's filamentous, but it does break apart, and the individual pods are or can be used as inoculants. So I think it surfaces both as a filamentous as well as individual species.
Good to know. Good to know. So Case wants to know, or I should say Cass, can you talk about how the algae is made? Oh,
that was going to be part of part B, but go ahead and give him a brief explanation of your bioreactor.
Okay, I'll talk about what I can talk about. We have brilliant marine biologists, phycologists, engineers, and doctors behind us. Again, while we're on the screen talking about this, I'm not the actual grower of the algae, but we have a really novel approach to how we grow this cell and these colonies. We utilize bioreactors. We use nanobubbles. We're very highly aware of how to create an intelligent system in order to support life and stability in these colonies. And so it's a very clean system, low energy. We have some pictures and some more information we can share there. But yeah, that is where our international patent comes in on, is how we grow this really clean, an intelligent system for the algae. And that's all the people that are not on the screen that developed that for us. It's really fascinating though, because the guys have set up 1, 2, 3 growing facilities so far. And 2 of our facilities are actually on bodies of water because there's no, harmful byproducts. There's nothing that we're doing. It uses very low energy. And so those are real high points of growing the algae. And
wait a minute, floating factories?
Little floating factories.
Cool.
No, that we've been approved to grow near water is just, that's where they want to be too. So
I just got this envision of this factory out there floating around on a body of water.
Some days in the marsh, because we live in the low country, right? So we're basically living in field and swamp area here in the low country. They are definitely floating some days during high tides.
Depends on the day.
Right.
So is there a pressure when spraying that the algae should not reach? And then we'll go on to the second one.
Yeah, that's a great question. 50 PSI is a good safe PSI. What is our threshold?
People definitely go up to like 65 or 70.
Yeah.
And as our marine biologist likes to say, the cells are rubbery little bastards and they're very durable. So it takes a lot to destroy them. And we have people who are putting this, it's a liquid concentrate, through all irrigation systems at a lot of variety of pressure and rate. And by rate, I mean rate of water. Our application rate is standard at 8 ounces an acre. But in terms of the amount of water that's used for a variety of equipment, it really does vary. So,
So is there anything known that actually damages them is the other half of the question.
Yeah, we very low pH. So like a pH of really under 2.5 is where you get into some trouble. 3 and 4 is kind of iffy. Really high acid environments are harmful.
Mm-hmm.
What were you going to say?
How about the other end of pH? What about alkaline? Does that cause any problems?
That we have less research on, just because a lot of the products that people are mixing this with are typically acidic as opposed to basic. But my guess is it would be a similar kind of very high end of the spectrum. Extremes may cause more problems. But that being said, like, this is a live colony and there's over at minimum 10 million cells per milliliter, but oftentimes much more than that. And so to actually kill off the entire colony takes a lot more energy than it would to kill some of the cells. I actually recently was asking him about freezing because I just got some algae in the mail to bring to growers and whatnot. And part of the bottles can freeze and it's cold up here, and it all thawed and the entire colony is just as dark green and totally fine. So even if there's a frozen component, or even if there's some of the cells may be struggling because of an environmental condition, they're alive, they're reproducing, they're remediating themselves, and there isn't been any harm.
Yeah, in many ways, you've targeted something that's bulletproof. And when I'm trying to release fungi, protozoa, or nematodes, there's all kinds of restrictions with pressure. Specifically, cavitation just decimates everything except for the single cell organisms. So, in many ways, that you have an incredible competitive advantage.
And with a really durable cell wall.
What do they call them? Rubbery little buggers?
Rubbery little bastards. It's the best way to explain it. And it all came about, I'll give this very brief anecdote, is I asked Andrew, so we spray algae on our pastures and hay fields up here. The cows are grazing and eating the hay. And I've been wondering if the algae cells can pass through the digestive tract of a cow, because we'll spray them when the cows are on the pasture and they're getting the cells inside of their body. And I don't know the answer to that question, but his answer to that question was, well, they're rubbery little bastards. And so they probably will get destroyed by the stomach acid, hence the low pH. But in more sort of indigenous systems with different compounds, there's the possibility of them not even being broken down. So that's a we don't know. That's something we want to learn about the animal health. We are learning a lot about animal health, but we want to learn more about animal health and the sort of path of how the algae are moving through the system.
In many ways, I bet it would increase animal health if they was fed part of their diets.
Yeah, it definitely has. A lot of the response from our ranchers has been pretty astounding. They're so observant of their system. They know when a new seed bank has popped up. They watch their animals. So some of those observances and feedback from them have been some of the best. They're seeing less pink eye, lower abort rates, more unassisted births. They're greasy. Their animals are greasy, so they've got this nice shiny coat. And just, when we first started studying, like fescue toxicity was causing cows and cattle to sit in water for long periods of time during the heat, and that pink eye, and just those things started improving after they were spraying their pastures with algae. So we do have plans to study those. Take those observances and feedback and study it, maybe through some university studies or independent studies with some other ranchers. But those have been really happy stories.
That's
two of the other anecdotes we've heard recently is that the conception rates have improved significantly over the course of very large ranches with thousands of head of cattle. And the other thing that is just absolutely amazing to me, knowing what the experience is of giving supplemental minerals to cows, is it's a self-selection. You put minerals out in the field and the cows choose whether they're going to go and lick the salt and eat the minerals or if they're not. And one of the ranchers we're working with in Montana has been looking at a reduction in minerals. He's been putting minerals out and the cows don't need them anymore. And he attributes that to the nutritional density of the forage and the hay that is improved, and that the algae has been sprayed on those fields. But I mean, he's been reducing his mineral content from like 90 bags to 1 bag, and his cows are selecting that. That's not his own choice. And I think there's a lot that we can learn in the world of livestock, because the livestock can teach a lot of what they prefer and what they know to be more nutritionally dense, where they go. We've put bales out with algae and bales without algae and see where the cows want to go and just, observe. And that observation is just as powerful as anything else, because they will choose what is more nutritionally dense.
Excuse me, Cheeto.
The star of the show.
Like, are we talking about animal health and nutrient what? Food?
Yeah. Treats. I want treats, Dad.
That's a great, we call ANI data, right? Anecdotal data. It's wonderful that you're getting those kinds of feedback from people who are in the trenches, living with the animals, know the animals, because again, at the end of the day, it's part of the ecosystem. So those same ranchers are probably going to notice that not only is there more health in their plants and their cows, but there's more beneficial organisms or bugs or birds, or, again, rebuilding the whole system that does provide the fertility and the nutrient cycling, nutrient density, and everything else for that sector, that section of the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're gonna really focus this upcoming year and several years on that. Really linking microbial diversity and functionality to nutrient density, to that sweeter fruit, to those higher levels of phytochemicals. We're really putting our dollars into that research and being ready for, showing the benefits in the supply chain for the grower who makes the changes to their, to their systems.
Love it.
So the next question, would a stinky creek flow into a rancid river, and asking for and it's basically, can they use that water, I think is the main purpose of the question.
So I think they're saying, is it going to cause a problem?
The algae, in particular, adding algae into a cropping system or into an irrigation system is not going to cause a problem. We've only seen healthy, good measurables and outcomes from adding, and we use a micro amount in the field. If you think of 8 ounces of cells out into an acre of the field, it's a micro amount because they're pretty powerful. We don't try to flood the system with anything else or create an overgrowth in the system. That's what I was thinking about when Camille said they're rubbery little or Andrew says they're rubbery little bastards. They can last out in a good environment, a moist environment, 2 weeks that we know, several weeks that we know of. And then they eventually will become food as well. So as they're out there, you can think of it as a long lasting effect. You have a continuous effect of those signaling molecules for weeks after application in the field until they, just naturally become food for something else. So
now, are they colony forming so that they'll continue to reproduce in the right environments?
That is a good question. Yeah, they are, we haven't studied how long they will exist in a really healthy system, or if they'll, that's their nature. That their nature is to survive in the system. And like we said, they're naturally occurring there too. So, we hope to boost and enhance the system with the algae until there's a possibility that you might not need that. But if you're pushing plants to production, you will probably need that support, as you go along. But yeah, they do reproduce. Their drive for survivability is strong. So, you'll see a colony. Let's take this as an example. I have a 5-gallon container of the first strain of algae we were working with years ago before we started the company. And it sat on my porch in all the elements and in all the ways. I wasn't storing it in, controlled environment. It was just on my porch around all the parties, the music, the people, the all the things, for 7 years. And then I just took it over to the lab for Andrew and the guys to look at it and check it out. And there's viable cells in there, really healthy, viable cells in there, because that's what they do. They'll crash, they eat, organic matter to build themselves back up again. But the point about utilizing it in the production system is that we really are being respectful of the system and using a micro amount of the algae to stimulate the system and stimulate the natural processes that come after that.
Well, a good comparison for folks that are familiar with kelp extracts or seaweed extracts, which have just been marketable for much longer, is that those will deliver a single dose of phytohormones upon application. And the difference in these live cells is that they're continuously able to produce those phytohormones because they're live and because they're actively participating in the system. And so with people that are, experienced with working with kelp or understand that kind of recurrent spreading the kelp, we used to use the powdered stuff and put it along the, beds of vegetables. And you got to do that pretty frequently to keep the phytohormones present in the system, which can be really effective. And these cells are able to do that on their own as they're alive in the soil and interacting.
Very cool. Do you guys market to the cannabis industry? They love you guys.
Yeah, no, hemp, cannabis loves algae. They're beautifully working together. They're very happy to be back together when they are. So yes, anyone growing cannabis, please give us a call. Yeah. We've seen some.
That was actually his new strain name, and so that was a mistake on my part.
Can you ship to Canada?
Not yet. We're working on it.
Okay.
We have a lot of growers in Canada that are waiting, and we'll let everybody.
You guys are international.
We are. Yes, we have. Right now, I think we're in 15 plus countries, either running pilot programs or talking about distributions in those spaces. And as we've talked about, let's talk about this too. It's very important to us for people to know that we are trying to work in a decentralized manner. We want small, growing facilities that service an area, not be shipping out from, one main point across the U.S. even. We really important to serve the community and bioregionalize the distribution there. So we really depend on building good partnerships in these other countries, and we felt like we've done that so far. We've been really blessed with the people who want to come along here, and there's a lot of other communities and cultures that are further along in their learning process, so they're more accepting of inviting the live culture of algae in this way back into the system. So those markets are growing really quickly. Yeah.
Great news.
Yes, definitely. And I love your guys' model of, it's your community that's ordering in bulk and then selling to the local community around them.
Yes. Yeah. As much community involvement as possible. We really would love for each distribution point, and this is up to our partners, but the opportunity is there. We think we're doing risk management with our growers, right? We really are. We're helping de-risk, the changes that they're making, the changing climate, changing prices, commodity prices. So the facilities actually have an opportunity to do that too. Work as an education point, really hold growers meetings there, invite people who are making biochars, invite the folks who have vermi teas, invite the folks, into the system, and all work together per region. So you're hyper regionalizing your resources everywhere you go. And so that's kind of been our model and how we've been working in each of the regions we move into. We learn from the growers, okay, who's making chicken litter, pelletized chicken litter, like who's doing this and that. And then we try to reach out to those folks and really work with them too.
Have you guys in any way been in communications with Santa Fe Community College?
No.
Okay, that's something you should do, is reach out to Charlie Schultz.
Okay.
At Santa Fe Community College. Tell them I sent you and tell them what you're doing. They have a big algae research facility there. They've been working with a lot of different varieties of algae, and might be a perfect place for you to locate another facility.
Okay, that's wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So our next question, if only using once instead of 3 times a year, is there a more important time to apply it based on plant life stage, veg, bloom, etc.?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we always say that the earlier the better to get it on the seed. The seed biology interaction with the live algae is spectacular. That's the way to set yourself up for success. If that's not available for whatever reason, permanent crops, or you can't apply on seed, then starting to stimulate the plant when you're able to, as soon as possible. For permanent crops, a lot of our growers are doing more of sort of a bud break, day 0 as the first application, and then repeating from there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a lot of the great thing about utilizing the algae too is that if you have some algae there and you're about to hit a drought season, or this time of year hail's coming through, or these are your flood year, months, you can spray algae before a big stressor event. It will really help them through that. That stress adaptation quality or mechanism of the algae is really strong. All the
those hormones, man. It's the rescue.
Yeah, it's a rescue, right?
There isn't really a bad time to spray the algae. I mean, we have people who they'll ask us that question. They'll come and they'll say, oh my gosh, my plants are a month away from harvest. Can I still try this? And the answer is yes, of course.
Okay. Well, the best thing in crop is having the farmer walk through to see, because that's how you learn. But
Farmer shadow.
What's that, Leighton?
Farmer shadow.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just wanted to say thank you to Aaron. We have our membership system available now for you guys. So anybody that wants to become a member, you can become a member and help support the channel. So thanks, Aaron.
Cool.
Dirt right. The microbes do the mining. Why then are we needed to test for present levels of nutrients? Should the addition of microbes along with some sort of carbon humate be sufficient?
Yes, this is a great question. I heard Harriet Mellon, who's a researcher I think she's in Austria. I can't remember saying this, but you could have a really pristine program where you know exactly where to place all of these inputs along the way. And that could be an expensive and also energy intensive way to manage your system, your crop system. Or you could build up your microbiology and do half the work and have them supplying these nutrients. Well, the reason we provide measurables to our growers is because they're learning. Everyone is in this space of learning. And so if we can show the movement of nutrients and then how the microbiology, and we want to talk about, we've been talking about bacterial species, but the, endo and arbuscular mycorrhizae growth that we see after the application of the algae, they're the oldest, that's the oldest love story in the books. They're symbionts. They, this interaction that happens. And also you mentioned humics and fulvics. Algae is really great with those things. The reason we use the measurables is when someone's trying to calculate how much maybe nitrogen they're going to reduce, or can we see how much carbon sequestration there's going to be, soil respiration and these things, so that they could get carbon credits. There's a lot of ways that we're trying to save growers money and then also make them some good money. So that's why we use those measurables in the system.
It makes
That's where we got to keep telling people a penny saved is a penny earned. It's all about the bottom line.
Yeah, that ROI. We had that conversation just today about, thinking beyond the yield. Liz and Russell have a event for farmers that's beyond the yield. Let's look at, your profit per unit. Let's look at, ROI based on lowering your input costs and not having to push for so much yield, because you've saved money right there.
That's the most frustrating thing with farmers. They all want to walk around pounding their chest. I got 300 bushel per acre, blah, 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 blah. What did it cost you? How much money did you make? If you'd spent half of that, would you have made more, right? And it's just ego. Yeah.
Well, and also they're in a system, some of the, they're under duress sometimes too, because if they're renting, their landlord is charging by yield rent. So they're attaching some sort of this monetary payment to yield. So they're chasing yield because they're going to have to make this certain payment. When if we could have Ryan was talking about this today from Think Regeneration, if you could have the landlords come and really learn about long-term investment tied to soil health, then they might change the way that they charge growers to rent land. And then they wouldn't have to be chasing yield. They would understand why the health of the system is a long-term investment for all parties involved. So it's all education.
More education. Get to work, Camille. Counting on you.
So Indigo Doggo wanted to know, because he was late, what strain or kind of algae is being discussed?
Yes, we're talking
Chlorella vulgaris.
Chlorella, yeah, Chlorella vulgaris is a chloroplast.
Okay, and our last question from Dirt again. Are these farmers seeing old seed banks come back in the fields that were repeatedly decimated and sprayed for 50 years plus?
Yes, our very memorable call from John in Texas on some lands that he had been managing, and he had taken over maybe for his brother after he passed. It was a sad story, but also an aha moment, because he saw this. He said, I've never seen this flower here. And some people are saying, oh, I had not seen this grass here in a long time. So yes, you think about the seed biome, and what the seed is told to do is to wait for the right conditions. Wait and be there for it. We could have, how many more shows could we have just to talk about the seed biome? And for those of you guys who are not growers on the call, let's think about it as raising a child. You pass along a lot of genetic information, but they also gather a lot of environmental influence over their lives. And the way you recruit community and friends and loves of your life and pets and where you live and all of those things, that's the right recruitment for success. So seeds are actually waiting for that right environment to also be able to then, form right recruitment for their optimal health. So yeah, we seed when we heard the seed bank, native seed banks were coming back there. That's part of that restoration work we'll talk about in the next podcast. Native prairie restoration, things like that. The algae can be really beneficial and useful. And there's a lot of those seeds that don't respond to chemical synthetic fertilizers. They're waiting for the good stuff,
Waiting for the biology to come back and go, oh, it's time to pop out.
That's right. Yeah, this is going to be my jam.
And, and I think in many ways it's important to point out, again, the relationship as an endophyte or as an endophytic, because those are the kinds of things that do stimulate seeds or biological evolution. We didn't even touch on that one. That was another whole topic that I was like, oh, I can't bring this up right now. When you said James White, I'm like, oh, damn, we could go down a friggin' rabbit hole.
Yeah.
We'll save that for another adventure. But thank God I brought those questions to fruit. I mean, what is it? We got 4.5 minutes left.
You're well trained in the cliffhanger. We're well trained in the cliffhangers.
We always have to promote the next show, right? So we do want to, and Lily put something on, I can't find it right now, but for those of you that don't know, Master Cho, the inventor of Korean natural farming, passed away over the weekend. We just want to give all the respect we can to what he did and brought to our planet, because he did some amazing work.
He'll probably have a succession. Typically, Master Cho is a title. It's not the name of the person. So this is a tradition that's been handed down for thousands of years. So at some point, I'm sure there will be another Master Chow that will take over the very important work of natural farming. Especially nowadays when your value of the yield is down, your inputs are up, all of your inputs are up all across the board, even including your lunch has gone up. So, methods of farming through using your inputs that you have on site and on hand that don't cost you anything are going to be very, very critical for especially the small farmers moving forward. Well, girls, I can't thank you enough for coming on today. This was amazing. So many different places we could have gone. I wish we could have stayed on spirituality, but I knew we had to get into algae. We're going to have to do just a whole nother show on that alone. But I'm really looking forward to bioremediation. I'm working on a number of projects right now where these types of bits of information are going to be critical. Can't wait to hear, what you've done, where you've been in this environment. But the fact that, again, that this algae, because it's so old that it's been forced to live in so many different hostile environments, has created the evolutionary successes that allowed it to remain viable after all of these years, and throughout all that succession. So, yeah,
you said it. That was very eloquent. I'm going to take that with me as we share more about the algae. We're really grateful to be here and for the work that y'all are doing too. So many people are paying attention and learning from you guys. So thank you for letting us be a part of that.
Hell yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. We appreciate the conversation and learning from you, and look forward to round 2.
Yeah, and I think, we should probably connect offline at some point. I know, Ken, I believe your emails are on my email as well. So let's stay in touch, because, I've got all kinds of different clients with different client needs. And I want to further the conversation about, your product, how best to apply it and use it in different environments. Because unfortunately, I'm, not only do I work in California, which is an environment to itself, but I also have clients back east in the Midwest. So, I've got a lady who's been on this podcast in the past that does, meadow or prairie restorations and desperately needs those seeds to germinate, because that will outcompete the ones that they don't want. The ones that are, I hate using the word evasive because I don't like it. I think all plants have a right to live, But when one plant takes over and pushes everybody else out, now you're in monocropping again. And we all know monocropping is not the answer to anything. It's the opposite direction that we want to go in. So let's carry this conversation on. Tomorrow, end of the week, whatever's free for you guys, whenever it works.
Yeah, we would love that. I'd also say to anyone who's watching and listening, if you have any questions that we couldn't get to, or you just want to connect with us, our information is on the website. Please call us, send us an email. We're always happy to talk about algae. It's our favorite part of our job.
Yeah.
In our life.
IG is actually in the description. So anybody wants to connect on IG with these two young ladies, you can look in the description for that as well.
And as always, Ken, thank you for all the hard work behind the scenes, putting this together and keeping it rolling every week, my friend. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Will.
Yes.
Okay, ladies, stay on, and we're going to end the broadcast. We're not sure on Wednesday with the Santa Ana winds in California. They're still having issues, but if possible, Andy Lopez, myself, will be on Wednesday. So just check out on Wednesday. If the preview comes up, then we should be good to go. Anyway, guys, have a great week, and we will see you soon.